Welcome back, and we are glad that you are still watching Solutions Barabarani as we go ahead with this war against graft. One man that Kenyans think that he knows a lot about corruption in Kenya and what goes on here at Integrity Center, that is the home to EACC, is none other than PLO Lumumba, the former chair of the Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, we spoke to him in the course of the week to try and seek answers. Is EACC the one to blame for the corruption in Kenya, or what is the way forward? Let's have a look at that. His passion to fight corruption can never be underrated. When PLO Lumumba was appointed to head the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission in 2009, his message to those involved in graft was very clear.
Whether you are a huge shark or a whale, we are telling you that you must search your soul and remember that the long-term health of this country requires that we exercise the ghost of corruption, so that we deal with the small fry as we deal with the big fish.
PLO Lumumba's appointment elicited a lot of optimism among Kenyans. Many people believed that his integrity was beyond reproach and the anti-graft movement would benefit immensely from his contribution. In 2011, President Kibaki signed into law the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Bill. The law replaced CAS with EACC and demanded that CAS director and his deputies vacate office to allow for new appointments. That was the end of the road for the besieged Patrick Lumumba as the CAS director. When we paid him a visit at Kenya Law School, we were keen to get his assessment on EACC performance in handling graft cases.
First of all, start by saying that we must never think that the task of fighting corruption is the task of the Anti-Corruption Commission, in this case the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. This is a small body with no more than 300 members of staff and is looking after a large government. Just to give you a sense of proportion, the Tanzanian equivalent of the EACC has 1,800 members of staff with over 15 branches. The EACC does not have the capacity and the resources. Corruption can only be fought by Kenyans. And when I hear people blame an anti-corruption commission, I tell them they don't know what they are talking about. They must understand that the EACC has three mandates: the mandate of education, the mandate of prevention, and the mandate of enforcement. But the mandate of enforcement is shared. The EACC merely investigates and sends its investigation report to the Director of Public Prosecution, who then makes the decision to prosecute.
The phrase that EACC is a toothless dog that just barks and can't bite is becoming a cliche to many Kenyans who see the commission as an underperforming body to fight corruption. So what is ailing the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission?
Let me tell you that number one is the sophistication of many of these mega corruption scams. If you look at some of them that are in the public domain, such as Anglo-leasing, it involves several jurisdictions. It involves the Swiss jurisdiction, it involves the English jurisdiction, the American jurisdiction. So when one is undertaking investigation, one has to receive the assistance of all these jurisdictions. Secondly, you will remember that when the Anglo-leasing started, the parties who are involved were filing cases against the Anti-Corruption Commission. So that is one challenge, that those who engage in corruption are very sophisticated. Number two is the Kenyan public. Don't be cheated. The majority of Kenyans don't hate corruption. They will talk about and against it, but when one of their own from their ethnic group is involved in corruption, then they will rise in his or her defense. I remember at one time when we were prosecuting or recommended for prosecution a number of cabinet ministers, members of parliament from their ethnic group came and bombarded us, saying, "You are finishing us." And people from their villages were also rising up. So our ethnicity of the negative kind is also a problem in the fight against corruption. Thirdly is political will. Don't be cheated by many politicians, including the opposition. When I see some of the individuals, even in the current opposition, shouting about corruption, they are people we were investigating. They are people I know who cannot account for 90% of their wealth. So they politicize the entire fight against corruption for short-term political gains. The fight against corruption must be undertaken when there is political will, which is sustained, where the politicians, particularly at the top level, will come up and say, if you are corrupt, you'll not serve in my government. You must have a court that is properly tuned, that when people are engaged in corruption, they'll be tried in accordance with the law and sent to jail, and their wealth is forfeited. I'm saying that as long as that is not happening, the EACC will never quite achieve its full potential in the area of enforcement.
According to the law expert, many Kenyans should prepare for tough times ahead, as the future of mega corruption scandals is uncertain. Unless there is drastic change, these cases might just crumble down.
Remember that in this country we had an organization called CASA. It was disbanded. We had an organization called CAS, which I headed, which was disbanded when we started fighting corruption and particularly attacking the political class. You'll have heard of the South African Anti-Corruption Commission and how they were disbanded. It happened in Zambia, in Malawi, in Nigeria, in Uganda. The truth is that in Africa, if an anti-corruption commission is dealing with the low-level individuals, is attacking the police and other things, petty corruption, then it is celebrated and nobody worries about it. But immediately you begin to focus on people in the political class or highly connected business people, then you have a problem, because these fellows have money, and as a part of their budget, they have money to corrupt these individuals. So if you look at Kenya, there have been very many corruption cases, mega scandals. Kenren, we had the Goldenberg, we have Anglo-Leasing, we had the maize scandal, we had the Kazi kwa Vijana scandal, and many others which have been left unresolved. And the reason why they are unresolved partly is because the anti-corruption commissions are underfunded and do not have the necessary political support and even the necessary public support. The public support is only occasional and fleeting. Kenyans are never enraged when there is a corruption scandal. And how do I say this? Because individuals who we know to have been engaged in corruption, when they leave their public offices and they go to seek elective offices, they are elected and they are appointed into other public bodies. So the truth be told, the reason why we have a problem is, number one, a very low level of political will, and political will means across the political divide. Number two, institutions that are charged with helping in the fight against corruption are underfunded. Number three, the public mood is so tolerant to corruption that indeed we only complain about it occasionally. And number four is ethnicity. We downplay ethnicity. Today, if you arrest any senior politician from any community, particularly the major ones, on corruption, they'll claim that they are being victimized. But as I've said, and I'll continue to say, the corrupt person has no ethnic affiliation. He is an economic terrorist who ought to be dealt with firmly and swiftly by all institutions.
If Kenya is to be a corruption-free country, then we must borrow a leaf from the developed nations, PLO says.
The reason why in countries such as the Scandinavian countries of Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, people succeed in the fight against corruption is because the general public mood is clear and unequivocal. The mere mention that you are involved in a corrupt scandal will force you to resign from public office. That doesn't happen here. So Kenyans must make a decision. Do they want corruption or they don't want? And many times Kenyans condemn corruption not because they hate it, but because they themselves don't have the opportunity to be corrupt. And we can see corruption in our churches, we can see corruption in our schools, we see corruption everywhere. So the public attitude must change. Number two, the political leadership must also change. In other words, the political leadership must demonstrate by word and deed that any individual who is involved in any corrupt act will be punished. And let me tell you, the way to punish a corrupt person is very easy. Number one, send him or her to jail. Number two, bar them from holding any public office. Number three, forfeit their ill-gotten wealth so that they are disabled, so that future generations know that they bear the mark of Cain upon their forehead and that they will be ostracized from the community. That is the only way in which it can be done. That is the only way in which it must be done. Because if it is not done, this country and this continent is going to die a slow death. Corruption has assumed cancerous proportions, and we see it daily in our newspapers, in our lives. It is painful. Some of us who have chosen the path of honesty, I can tell you today, one of the most difficult things in Kenya today is to be a warrior for truth and a warrior for that which is good and right. It is painful, but yet we must never say die. We must never say die.
What a way to end the show tonight. Indeed, we should never give up on the war against corruption in Kenya. I've been your host, Elijah Mwangi, and you can communicate to us, send us feedback. Our Facebook page is WTV Kenya, and our Twitter handle is @WTVKE. You can also send us a short message. Our number is 20058. Till next time, God bless you.